Hello, welcome to Module 4. And as you can see on the screen, Module 4, it's time to evaluate. So far, you have done the following preparing for the 7-1 project. First, you've chosen an article from the 3 possibilities in Module 3. Then you critically read the article, looking at it closely. You considered the following for the article you chose: purpose, core idea, genre, writing situation, and audience. And then fourth, you considered these same things for the writing you'll do for 7-1 project. Now you're ready to move toward writing a draft of your 7-1 project next week. And the thing that I want to emphasize through this video and through this module, the purpose of the 7-1 project will be evaluation. Your essay will evaluate the effectiveness of the article you chose in achieving the author's purpose. That's very important. Your essay will evaluate the effectiveness of the article you chose in achieving the author's purpose. So let's start by looking at the Module 4 information online. As always, we have learning objectives followed by a module overview. And the objectives always list the specific things that you will be accomplishing by the end of this module. But I want to point out a couple of things. If you go under module overview, it lists actually the 3 things that you will focus on, what you will learn about in module 4, elements of a thesis statement. So you'll actually be writing a thesis statement. Elements of the 3 genres, evaluations is what we're going to focus on. And then elements and purposes of introductory sections of writing projects. So you will be writing the introduction paragraph for your writing project, beginning with the draft next week. So you'll have the thesis statement and the introduction paragraph already written to get you ready to start on the draft next week. As always, you'll want to review the module overview along with the tips for success. And then the module at a glance gives you step-by-step plan to work your way through this module effectively. So be sure to take a look at that as well. Next, then, we have the Module 4 guide. And the guide's purpose is to kind of give you an overview and prepare you for the reading that you'll do, the more in-depth reading that you'll do in the resources page. And as I noted previously, the focus of the assignments this week is a thesis statement and drafting an introduction. So we start off with information about thesis statements. Specifically, in a moment, we'll look at what evaluation thesis statements do, but this is a good review of what thesis statements in general do. And for our purposes, get to draw again, we'll be doing these 2 things. First, you need to organize 2 concepts, your central claim and your supports for that central claim. And you'll be learning how to do that through both the readings and the assignment instructions. There's also information here about the parts of an introduction paragraph, the 3 common parts, how they function, as well as some final information about thesis statements. And the key concepts are important to note before you move on to the readings. The thesis is your unique claim plus support for your claim. And that will be in 1 sentence at the end of the introduction paragraph. The introduction paragraph is made up of a hook, context, and then ends with a thesis statement. Those are important things to remember. All right, so we know that the resources page has the listings for the readings. And we begin with readings all focused on evaluations. At this point in the course, we haven't really yet said that the 7-1 project was going to be an evaluation essay. We talked about it being an analysis essay. Specifically now, we need to think of it as evaluation. And so these readings are going to give you all the information that you could possibly need on evaluations, starting by defining the genre, claiming a topic, what that means when you're writing evaluation essays, imagining your audience. When you're writing an evaluation essay, who would be interested in reading that, gathering materials, organizing your ideas, and then choosing a style and design. Each of these readings is relatively short, so be sure that you do all of them, because that way you'll have covered all the aspects of evaluation. And then again, be able to answer the questions or read the questions before so that you'll be able to answer them when you're done doing the readings. How can you establish and defend criteria when writing an evaluation? That's something that you need to think about. Which types of topics should you evaluate? Well, in this case, you're being assigned a topic, so that's your focus, is the article that you chose in Module 1. How can you organize an evaluation to examine differences through comparing and contrasting? That will be covered in those readings, so you'll be able to answer that question when you've done the readings. Chapter 24, the next assigned reading, is focused on thesis statements. Last week, there was a short video on thesis statements that was really good. It might not be a bad idea to go back and review that. But this reading will also give you specific information about creating thesis statements for evaluation essays. Why is it important that you write a declarative sentence and not a question? Be sure that you can answer that. When should a thesis be introduced? Always. It always will be introduced by the parts of the information or the introduction paragraph that come before the thesis. And why is it important to consider your audience and purpose when writing a thesis? Be sure that you can answer that as well. The next reading, if you just click on drafting introductions, it'll take you to the reading, and I believe it opens as a download. This covers more information, more specific information about writing introductions. What are the 4 purposes of an introductory paragraph? Why is it important to determine what background information would be helpful for the audience? That's why it's so important to identify who your audience is going to be so that you will know what background information they need in order to be able to understand your thesis statement. What are various methods to draw the reader in? Well, in this reading, it will give you some examples of various methods, as well as explaining how they work. Then we have 2 videos, Write About Ideas from Readings. This is a short video, and it's an interesting one because it focuses on the conversation between the writer and the reader. Most of the time, I don't think we really think about that too much. We've been busy analyzing the article that you chose, analyzing for who that author's audience was, and then in the last module, thinking some about who your audience might be for the evaluation essay that you're going to write for 7-1 project. But it's a conversation between the writer communicating with the reader. But then the reader also communicates back with the writer in their response to the reading. So this is an interesting topic for you to think about as we move towards writing the draft next week, because you're in communication with your reader, with your audience. And then finally, the writing process. I believe this was, let's see, this is a good review if we haven't covered this information already. Again, it's a relatively short video, but it goes over the steps of the writing process, including what we've been focusing on up to this point. So what are some of the elements of the pre-writing stage? And what is the difference between writing and editing? What is the difference between revising and editing? We have mostly been doing pre-writing up to this point, and starting next week, then you'll be working on the actual writing stage by producing a draft. Then once the draft has been produced, you'll be revising that draft, receiving feedback, and then finally editing it before submission. So this is a good video to help you kind of visualize that process, as well as review the steps so that you have some understanding of where we are in that overall process and where we'll be going. We also have some APA and MLA resources. Again, these were in the previous module. You use those in writing your, in citing your summary, quotes, and paraphrases information. Remember where these are located, because when you write the draft next week, you will need to cite quotes that you use as support. And then we have additional support, optional information. The first one is a video, which we've actually already seen before. It's an introduction to audience and writing situations. However, you might want to review that. And then the next one, chapter 33, is important to read no matter where we are in the writing process. It's about inclusive writing. And most of you have probably started your educations and written with the use of inclusive writing, it used to be standard that he or him were the fallback or default pronouns that were used, assuming that all readers were male. And that is no longer considered appropriate. We now use wording that includes everyone by gender, by the use of pronouns that are inclusive, etc. So chapter 33 is a good review or introduction if this is not something that you focused on previously. So I really would like for you to read this, not only for the paper that we're writing, but also for future courses, so that you're writing inclusively and appropriately as you in all your writing. And then chapter 7 in the textbook, personally, I don't think that we need to read either this one or the next one, chapter 8. They cover explanations and arguments. We're writing evaluation, and reading about explanations and arguments probably will just confuse you. So I'm suggesting that you do not read these. The reason that they include them as an optional reading is that in future courses, you're very likely to use these two genres, explanations and arguments. And at that time, I can guarantee that you'll have readings available to you that will explain those genres. So that is all of the information on the resources page. So now we're ready to look at the first assignment, 4-1 decision tree, creating a thesis statement. And as always with these assignments, we need to click on guidelines and rubric to get to the real information, the actual instructions. But first I want to read you the overview so we can get a focus of what the assignment is going to cover. In this assignment, you will be guided through decisions in order to create the thesis statement for your project. When you create a thesis statement, you create a structure for the ideas in your project. That structure also helps your reader know what to expect if they keep reading past your thesis. That is what a thesis does. It gives the reader information about what is to follow, what the focus is, and how you will introduce that, or how you will address that information in the body paragraphs that follow. I'm going to read this direction because it's very important. Address the following items in chronological order. The answers to these questions will help guide you in forming your thesis statement. Submit the answers and your thesis statement using the template linked in the What to Submit section. So it's important that you do these in order. Part 1, identify the topic and state the claim. Then combine the topic and claim to form the first part of the thesis statement. In just a second, we'll look at the template and you'll see that it is also arranged so that you're doing these in chronological order. Part 2, it's the second part of the thesis, explain different reasons why the claim is true. That's the information that will appear in your body paragraphs. And then combine the different reasons why the claim is true to form the second part of the thesis statement. And then part 3, you're just going to put those together and write the complete thesis statement. But it is important that you do those 3 things in order. So we have a template, and as always, if you just click on the hot link, it will take you to the template. And here it is. It's a little table this time, so it might be a little bit more difficult to figure out where they want you to put things, but take your time and you'll be able to figure it out. First, you need to be sure and identify the article, the chosen article in the box here. Then you're going to identify the topic of the article, state the claim, which is your you evaluating the effectiveness of the article. Then combine the topic and the claim to form the first part of the statement. Part 2, one reason why the claim is true, how, why, or why not. And in just a second, we're going to look at a sample thesis statement, as well as talk about where you're going to come up with the information for the claims. Notice that there are 3 boxes here where you're going to come up with 3 reasons that support the claim. I'm going to list those in the insert text parts. And then you're going to combine those different reasons, and that will become the second part of the thesis. But you don't have to write the entire thesis till part 3 when you write the entire thesis in the insert text box. So that's that one. We also have an example, an exemplar. Click on that, and it's downloaded, and it will open up. And here you have that same table with the information inserted for our sample article, what everyone needs to know to be more productive. So this shows you not only where things go, but also the text and how it relates to the chosen article for the example. Please do read through this. It'll give you an example of what you're looking for in terms of the wording and the thinking about your own article. Notice that there are 3 claims. Those are combined, and then at the very end we have a complete thesis statement that begins with part 1, it's followed by part 2, and combined together to make a complete thesis statement. For just a moment, I want to look at the second part of the thesis statement, the reasons, because that's probably the most challenging thing for you to come up with this point as you're starting to think about evaluation. So the directive is one reason the claim is true, how, why, or why not. You're going to be making a claim about the particular article that you've written. Let me switch over to my highlighted thesis statement. All right, remember that a thesis is a statement in which a writer identifies or suggests the specific idea that will give focus to a paper. An evaluation thesis makes an explicit claim of value based on criteria of evaluation. Here is a thesis from the sample evaluative essay for 7-1 project. Bruce Meniere argues for a balance between productivity and downtime, emphasizing the value of productivity and ways to be a productive worker. That first part tells us what the topic of the original article is. And that is followed by your claim, your critical claim, your evaluative claim. Bruce Meniere, I never can pronounce that, argues for a balance between productivity and downtime, emphasizing the value of productivity and ways to be a productive worker. But, and this is what's highlighted, although she emphasizes the importance of work-life balance, she does not cover as many ways to truly take a break and improve the personal side of life to create that balance. So here we've made a claim, an evaluative claim about the effectiveness of that article. How effectively does she accomplish her purpose? And the claim says, although she emphasizes the importance of work-life balance, that's what she does well, she does not offer as many ways to truly take a break and improve the personal side of life to create that balance. That is the reasons, that is the critical or the evaluative claim. She does this well, but she doesn't do this other thing as well. And that's your job, is to point that out to your audience. This works, but the rest of this does not work so well, and you need to know that. Note how the highlighted statement makes an evaluative claim about the Rose Meniere article. That is key to writing an evaluation essay. And it's really, really important that you remember, you will not be summarizing the article you choose when you write your evaluation essay. You will be evaluating the article's effectiveness. All right, so let's come back to the table, the exemplar table, and look at the information in part 2, the second part of the thesis, where you list the supporting reasons that prove that your claim is true. Reason 1, she overly emphasizes the value of productivity and ways to be a productive worker. Another reason the claim is true, she emphasizes the importance of work-life balance, but does not offer as many ways to truly take a break. And the third reason the claim is true, she also does not offer as many ways to improve the personal side of life to create that balance. Well, where did this writer, this student, come up with this information? The writer came up with this information, this student came up with the information by closely reading, critically reading the original article. Remember that the thesis starts with a statement of what the topic was, and then makes the critical evaluative claim, and then supports it by coming up with reasons that came from the original article. What did you see in the original article that supports your claim? Your claim may be that the author does everything well. If so, you're going to have to prove it. Specifically, what does the author do well? Where? How? You're going to have to develop the information that supports that in your body paragraphs in your evaluative essay. So we can imagine that the body paragraphs, there would be 3 of them in this essay. One that focuses on how she overly emphasizes the value of productivity and ways to be a productive worker, and that would include likely a quote from the original article. Second reason, she emphasizes the importance of work-life balance, but does not offer as many ways to truly take a break. In order to prove that's true, we need a supporting quote or paraphrase from the article that shows how that's true. Same for the third. She also does not offer as many ways to improve the personal side of life to create that balance. So we need to see that's true by how it actually happens in the article. And then we finish by putting it into a complete thesis statement. And you'll want to use this one as a template to help you kind of construct yours. That's why we provide templates and examples, is so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We're just learning how things function and giving you an opportunity to try those things out. So both the template and the exemplar are listed in the what to submit information. And as always, be sure that you're reviewing the grading rubric. Notice that, as always, the criteria match what is in the table, making sure that you've done all those things as well as clear communication. Read the descriptions in the meets expectation art column so that you are sure that you're meeting expectations. Also use the rubric as a checklist to make sure that you have done everything that you're supposed to do. All right, that's that assignment. Move on to, oops, I always forget. Let's move on to the next assignment, 4-2, preliminary introduction. Click on guidelines and rubric. And what you'll be doing in this is writing an actual introduction. And again, there will be an exemplar, a template and an exemplar to help you do that. Let's read the overview. In this assignment, you will use artifacts from past assignments, and that's just information you've gathered from past assignments, to form the introduction of your project. Specifically, this assignment will assist you with continuing to work with identifying the topic of the text, describing the writer's purpose, articulating the core idea of the text, and summarizing details of the text that are relevant to the core idea. And every time they say text, replace that with the article you chose in Module 1. That's what they're referring to. Again, it's important that you do things in order for this assignment. According to our textbook, we have 4 things that the introduction should do, and it should do it in this order. Number 1, it should draw your reader into the essay. Number 2, introduce the topic of the essay. Number 3, provide some background information. And number 4, present the main idea or thesis of the essay. In the specific instructions, you must address the following. You have to write sentences to draw the reader in, sentences to provide an overview of the topic. That includes both the topic of the paper and background information to the reader, the audience. It also gives you information about how long it should be, 1 or 2 sentences, 1 or 2 sentences, 1 sentence for the thesis statement. We put those all together into an entire paragraph, and that's your introductory paragraph. Again, we have a template. Take a quick look at that. This is the kind of template that you're more familiar with. it's not a table, so you're just inserting text at the end of each statement. And you'll want to follow the template, do it in order, and feel free to do 1 to 2 sentences. And I suggest more than one sentence, just to give you a chance to kind of fill out that introductory paragraph. Where does the information come from? It comes from your close reading and analysis of the original article that you chose in Module 1. So what's something that could draw the reader in? And you'll know what those kinds of things are from having read the assignments on the resources page for Module 4. The section on drafting an introduction will be very helpful with that. Similar, provide an overview of the topic. That's going to be that brief summary. And we've actually already written a brief summary of your article in a previous assignment, so you can go back and look at that. And then you have the thesis statement because you have done assignment 4-1 in this module. You use the template, so you have that completed thesis statement at the bottom, and then you're going to put all of these together into an introductory paragraph. And when it says insert text here, what it means is for you to actually put them together, take all these parts, put them together into a paragraph in this space here. That's what you'll be turning in. Remember that all paragraphs are indented. We also have an exemplar, and notice that these are fairly lengthy responses, and you will need to be able to provide the same level of information that is shown here in the example. And it may require you going back to your original article, the article you chose in Module 1, and doing some deeper reading to find out what can I use from the article or the topic of the article to draw the reader in. In giving an overview or a summary of the article, read the example here and see if you can do the same thing about your original article. And then include the thesis statements. You'll just be copying and pasting the thesis statement that you developed in assignment 4-1. And then we have it combined here into an actual paragraph. Read through the steps, but then also read the paragraph when it's put together. And I strongly encourage you to read it out loud so that you can actually hear what it sounds like. You can hear it moving from drawing the reader in to providing an overview to providing the thesis statement. Does yours sound the same way when you read it out loud? That's a good way to kind of compare and contrast between the example given and the one that you actually write. Does it have all the parts? Does it provide the same information in the same order? Does it move smoothly from part to part? And again, be sure to review the rubric. The rubric matches the steps in the instructions. Use the meets expectations column to make sure that you're meeting expectations. That's always your goal. Clear communication just means that you're communicating to your audience, which in this case is me, effectively. So be sure that you're running a spell check, that you're making any corrections that are needed, that you're indenting paragraphs, etc. All right, that is everything for Module 4. As always, the module ends with the look ahead to Module 5. That's always a good thing to just read as you get done with your work. Once you've completed all the assignments, to know where we're going next, so that you can start thinking ahead about time management, etc. So have a good week.